When the military headquarters are on fire, when people die not from an enemy attack on the front, but from the blows inflicted from outside the capital of the country, this is not an episode. This is a provocation. This is a line behind which the war of interests is no longer starting, but a clash of wills. Israel has bombed objects of the Syrian army in Damascus and in the province of Suez, saying that in this way it protects the friendly population of Druze from oppression. But what is behind this noble pretext? And most importantly, what follows now? Subscribe to the channel, so as not to miss the next episodes. Events develop faster than they manage to hide. Syria has officially declared the actions of Israel. The Minister of Foreign Affairs called the strikes an act of aggression and stressed that the country leaves the right to answer for itself. This is not rhetoric. This is not a game of words. This is a threat under which the tension accumulated over the years of war, destruction and humiliation is pulsating. Israel has struck deeply on the territory of Syria, including in the capital area. According to the information published by independent sources, objects of the Armed Forces Command, logistics warehouses, as well as parts of military infrastructure that had nothing to do with the events in Suez, were attacked. The actions were lightning fast. And, as Syrian sources claim, none of the objects was in the zone of direct conflict with Druze. There is a logical question. If the motive is to protect the peace of the world, then what is the motive? If the motive is to protect the peace of the world, then what is the motive? Israel has long emphasized that it will react to any threat to its interests in the region. After clashes between Syrian government troops and local armed groups began in the province of Suez, which include representatives of the Druze, the situation escalated. But internal tension does not give reason for foreign intervention, especially military strike. Israel interpreted the event as a potential ethnic purge and announced its obligation to protect its friends. However, such formulations are a subtle diplomatic mask. The logic of force is hidden behind it, to show Syria that any movement in the south of the country will be stopped not by negotiations but by missiles. This is a signal and at the same time a check whether Syria is ready to defend its borders. Syria's response so far has not changed. The situation is limited by statements. But a certain logic is built up behind them. Damascus cannot afford to publicly ignore the attack. This would put the state's ability to act itself in doubt. In the eyes of allies, in the eyes of Iranian strategists supporting Syria, in the eyes of militias in Lebanon and Iraq, which coordinate with the Syrian military command. Silence in this case means defeat, even if it does not happen. This is not legally established. According to international analysts, Syria may respond in the near future. Not symmetrically, its capabilities are limited. But asymmetrically, quite. Participation of proxy groups, strikes on Israel's positions on the Golans, escalation in the area of Daraa. All this is already being discussed in the couloirs. Damascus does not have a luxury army, but it has a network of connections ready for mobilization. The events in Sweden are difficult in themselves. This is a unique region, mainly populated by Druzes, who traditionally did not interfere in conflicts directly. Sweden has become an arena of clashes of interests in recent years. Druzes do not trust the central government, do not support Islamic radicals and are afraid of ISIS, despite the formal defeat of this group. Recent tensions began with protests against the economy and local self-government, but in the end, they poured into open gunfights between local groups and government troops. Israel took advantage of the moment. Air strikes are not signals. This is blood. These are destroyed buildings. These are corpses. And when missiles land on the territory of an independent state, whatever the motivation, this is an act of war. This is how Damascus is perceived. This is how the street perceives it. In social networks throughout Syria, calls for mobilization have already begun to spread. Manifests in support of the army, photos of destruction after strikes. On the evening of July 15, in Homs, Aleppo and Latakia, spontaneous rallies took place, where people chanted, "Sovereignty is not subject to discussion." One of the turning points occurred when the leader of Hezbollah, Hassan Nasrallah, spoke with a statement in which he stated, "Any attack on Syria is an attack on the entire opposing front." These words in Beirut were perceived as a signal for mobilization. Immediately after that, in southern Lebanon, the growth of the activity of armed detachments was noticed. And although neither side directly announces readiness for war, transfers are already being recorded at the border. Israel, in turn, continues to insist. It acts within the framework of self-defense. Prime Minister Netanyahu said that strikes are necessary to prevent a humanitarian disaster in Suez. But at the same time, He did not bring a single fact about genocide, ethnic cleansing or oppression of friends. Except the words of local activists. All this intensifies the feeling that actions are coordinated in a nonviolent manner. These actions are coordinated not with the purpose of defense, but within the framework of a new doctrine of regional control. The international community has so far limited itself to cautious statements. U.S. representatives expressed concern. The United States called for restraint. Russia condemned the strikes, but did not take steps. But this is exactly what is dangerous. Such silence gives carte blanche. To leave these actions unanswered means to create a precedent. To give a signal that Damascus is open for bombing. That it is possible to interfere in its internal affairs without getting sanctions. That any conflict within the country is an invitation for an external blow. Syria will not leave it without an answer, because it cannot. Not because it wants war, but because otherwise it will lose control of its own territory, its future and the trust of its citizens. This is just the beginning. Syria did not respond immediately, but this does not mean that it will not respond. The war has taught Damascus to wait. In the first hours after the airstrikes on Damascus and Suez, statements from official offices were restrained. But behind this restraint was tension. The army was brought into combat readiness. In a number of areas, the transfer of troops began. And in the information space, a wave of signals about the upcoming asymmetrical response rolled through. Damascus does not have powerful aviation,